last one's coming, sitting down now. Thank you for that.
I'm sure your stories are more interesting than ours, but we're stuck up here, so we will try to entertain.
Well, welcome to this next panel. I'm Sarah Mursal. I am an emerging production designer, or I've just been recognised as a production designer in the UK. And it's an absolute honour Inbal asked me to do this panel. I also teach at Ravensbourne University, part-time teacher, and I'm really keen on getting youngsters into the industry from diverse backgrounds. But that's me. So I'd like to introduce you to my panel today. I've got Karen Murphy. Kristi Zea. And the lovely KK Barrett.
Jeremy Hendel. I'm taking Jeremy's place, and he's working on stuff that will be very entertaining for us, so I won't speak for him, but watch it.
So, obviously the question is about a shared vision and collaborating with directors. You've all worked with some phenomenal directors. Is there someone that you can talk about, your collaboration process, that you've worked with quite a few films, or a particular one, and just how you started and a particular film? Do you want to start, Karen?
Sure. I think it's a slightly strange collaboration for me, because I started working with Catherine Martin, who was the designer with her husband Baz Luhrmann, on Moulin Rouge many years ago. And we just initially, I started doing very sort of architectural drawings for her, and drawings of the sets with all the dressing in them, and line drawings, which they caught Baz's eye quite early. And we continued to collaborate over the years, and I would go off and do my own thing and then come back to that same collaboration. So Baz and I, we knew each other very well. He knew me when I was young, and we just sort of, in the later films, I have been the production designer. So we could talk, I guess, about Elvis, because it's the most recent collaboration. And I think the most unique thing about the collaboration with him is that he goes to a studio and asks them for a particular amount of money to set time aside for us. So we don't come to the project when it's already researched or he's been writing for a long time. We come to it when he comes to it. And that is not true of other projects and other directors that I work with, but it's his way of immersing himself and us in a story, in the research. We visit places. With Elvis in particular, Catherine and I took a road trip. We planned it out ourselves, and we went to a lot of the places he recorded in, where he grew up in the South. We went to Las Vegas, we went to Los Angeles for that period when he was living there. And Baz had set up relationships with people that we also started to talk to them and got oral histories, and were able to look through the archives at Graceland. So it's a unique filmmaking process, Baz's process, but it does mean that throughout the rest of the project, you, the key collaborators, become people that other people on the project can approach and say, what would happen, what would he have done, what would happen here, because you sort of know, it just becomes with this time you've spent with the material.
Very good. I was going to ask you a question about that, but I think we'll circle around later on. Kristi,
I guess the only thing I want to say is that prior to production designing, I was a stylist for commercial television, which got me into the business, and I started to work with people who would then move on to do film afterwards. And it was a good learning place, just to get an understanding of the insanity of it all. And then I started to do costume design, and the first film I did was called Fame, with Alan Parker. And it was an interesting experience because I had gone to the High School of Music and Art. And so I wasn't in the union at the time, and Alan said, okay, I'm hiring you to do this, just don't fuck up. So I wound up doing more and more costume, and the last one I did was Silverado. Talk about Westerns. Yes. And it was lots and lots of fun, but I realized that what I really wanted to do more than anything was to design the whole production. And as a result of my work with James L. Brooks, he told David Seltzer, who was an aspiring independent filmmaker, on a small film called Lucas, that I should, he basically told David, just let her do whatever she wants, which was an incredible sort of pat on the back. And so I started doing, and my education, by the way, I thought I was going to be a journalist. So I don't come through the normal channels of art department and architecture or anything like that. I love it, but I don't have that training. So I met one day, I got a phone call from Kenny Utt, who's the producer for Jonathan Demme, and he said, Jonathan needs a new pair of eyes, and we'd like you to come and meet with us. And that was for a film called Married to the Mob, which was an insanity, and an absolutely wonderful experience working with Jonathan for the first time. And then that's how I started working with Jonathan. And I worked with Jonathan on practically all of his films after that. And he's now up in with the gods, and but he was an incredible collaborator, and I learned everything from him.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And KK, your director? Directors?
So now we have an architect, a writer, and I was a painter. And I walked backwards into film. I didn't expect to be doing this, but it added up to everything that I was experienced in. I just didn't know it yet. And so I started in music videos and commercials, and then those commercial directors became feature directors, and then you kind of all grew up and educated each other as you went. I did some early horror films. Don't look for Bloody Pom-Poms or Crack House. But and then I realized that they weren't going to be good enough to convince people that I could do something bigger and better. And so I quit doing films for 10 years, just did commercials, and that's where I met my next batch of filmmakers. That's where I met Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry, and then through them I met David O. Russell and Sofia Coppola. And so the first film back was, after 10 years, was being John Malkovich, which was very lucky. And anytime you've got a writer that good, you're sailing, as Charlie Kaufman. And then after Spike's film, Sofia was making Virgin Suicides, and she had a friend start for a couple weeks, lost in translation, but drop out because of a family illness. And so she said, can you come to Tokyo and help with my film? And I said, well, I'm on this commercial with another friend of yours, and he won't let me go. I asked him. Yet. So I showed up the night before we started filming. There was an art department in place, and Ulrika was here, who is here, was part of it. And so opened the set that day, and then quickly went out and started to find the other locations. And then every day I'd have to open the set and say, bye, I'm going out to find locations. And then at night I'd say, sorry, I have to go look for a karaoke bar. And they'd go like, we're coming. Bill would come, Sofia would come, everybody would come. So it was only 24 days of shooting, but it was a lot of fun madness. Then I went back to Spike and Charlie Kaufman on adaptation, and then Lost in Translation was a hit, so I went back to Marie Antoinette, back to Sofia. She's not Marie Antoinette. And and this became kind of a toss back and forth, and then I worked on Michel Gondry's thing and David O. Russell, and it was very strange that I knew these four people socially before I'd ever worked on a film with them. And so there was an inherent trust. And I think what we're talking about here somewhat is a long-term collaboration with inherent trust, and when that trust is pushed, or needs to be pushed a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking on the back of that about those relationships with particular directors. I think each of you have got a couple that you can talk to. What's the process? Do they all work the same? Do they all come to you with, hey, here's the script, this is how I've broken it down? Or do you start R&D together? If you would talk a bit about that.
Sure. I actually really enjoy working with a brand new director. It's one of my favorite things, and it's working with Baz and Catherine for so long. I did start to sort of explore. I moved countries. I moved to the US for the Get Down for Baz, and then from there I really started to make some other contacts and do smaller films. But because of that, and because of the different sizes of the films I've done, the processes are all quite different. And one person that I'd like to talk about is another Australian who also has a theatre background, who Fiona Crombie's also worked with, is Justin Kurzel. And I've now done 2 films with him and some commercial projects. And one film in particular was about Ned Kelly, called The True History of the Kelly Gang, and we had 15 million Australian dollars, and for a period film set in 1870 with everything had to be sort of created and designed. He came to that process with a very clear set of ideas, and he always does that. He's a very well prepared and great communicator, and what happens there is the time that you have in prep with him is very short because the budget's quite small, but he comes creatively prepared, which, in contrast to Baz, who you watch him becoming creatively prepared. So I really like working with Justin because I find that I get even more creative because he starts with something, and it's a real jumping off point for me to go much, much further.
And is that a visual narrative that you're working with? Or is it
definitely
conversations
with him in particular? It's very visual. Also, Melina Matsoukas, who I've done a film called Queen and Slim with in New Orleans, she's the same. She's very visual. But then there'll be somebody else who has no visual. Maggie Gyllenhaal, I've just worked with her. She is very creative and incredible writer, but she does rely on us for the visual side of it. And on the project that we've just done, her words are so clear that it's very easy. It was very easy for me reading the script alone before we'd even met on the movie to find the imagery that I would be searching for and seeking out during the process.
And thank you for that. And for you, Kristi, I think budgets and timing has changed like these days. I don't know what it's like in the US so much, but in England, budget seems to be getting a bit smaller and time seems to be getting a bit tighter. So there seems to be less time to collaborate with a director. Was it like, how long did you have when, on the projects that you were working with? Did you have much time? Is the process the same? Has it changed for you?
I think it's interesting because at one point, Jonathan Demme said to me, we made movies during the golden age of filmmaking. And this was pre-television. And I think we had, for example, on Beloved, a film that I did based on Toni Morrison's book, we were doing soft prep on that for like a year. And that was basically because we wanted all kinds of seasons. We were building down in Philadelphia. We built a whole town. We built houses. We built, carnivals. I mean, everything that was on the film had to be done from scratch, except downtown Philadelphia, but then we took all that over and turned it into 1860s. Philadelphia is a great city to work in. But also, the fact that we would start on a project in soft prep long before we actually needed the time. And that's, for some reason, not as easy to do these days. Television is particularly ruthless, I think, in terms of time and money. The creative aspect of it, if you're lucky and you get on one of those nice, long, limited series, you probably have more money and more time. But certainly now, I think it's rather difficult to get. But I think in general, there's always a limit to how much money you have. And so what you wind up doing, whether I'm working with someone like Jonathan, who basically says, you do it. Just tell me what, how would you shoot this scene? He gets very, very generous with how things are done, and that was always a great thing to work with him. Whereas someone like Scorsese, he takes his scripts and he puts annotations inside each page, exactly the shots that he wants, because he started as an editor. So he wants every scene to be covered in a very, very specific way. And if you try and show him a location where he can't actually film a scene, he gets very upset. And he says, I took 3 weeks to put this whole together, and how can you tell me that I can't get this shot here? And I said, because it's a great location, and I'm sorry. I'll look for something else. He said, no, I'll do it. But ideally, you ascribe to that kind of a discipline with him. Someone like Sam Mendes is hyper realistic and also does enormous amounts of research. So he shows you lookbooks ad infinitum of things, and they're mostly photographs that he likes. So each director has their own process. And so what you do is you adapt to whatever is necessary. And what you really want to do is give them everything. You want to create the container for the actors to come in and do their best work. And so what I like to do is bring everybody in, bring the director in, bring the DP in, and just make sure that the container that I've created gives everybody what they need.
So you've got quite an interesting story about Scorsese, haven't you, about one particular set that you wanted to change?
The one in particular was, I don't know, that one? Yes, I think it's that one. Anyway, the ceiling wasn't high enough. And I was sort of desperate because we had already sort of approved the location and everything was happening, and I thought it was going to be fine. And so God bless Michael Ballhaus, who's also up there, because he said, I can do this. I'll just put the camera underneath the dolly piece or whatever the hi-hat is. And suddenly we were all right. But it does mean always to just make sure that your DP is on your side.
KK? So, yeah?
There's paid soft prep, and then there's free soft prep. I know that when I get a script, even if it's for something that I've decided not to do, I'll still be sending emails like a month later going, what if you did this? What if you did this? Like nibbling at it. You can't get it out of my head, And with Spike, he shares very early on. He'll call and just read scenes and keep you involved and hear your feedback. And I don't know if he's reading it for his own voice or actually to get the feedback, but he gets it. And Sophia was quite different. You would just get the script, and it might be 70 pages. And then there'd be 2 pages of images as an impression, and she'd go, you get it. But you had to know their sensibility, Yeah. And she's very particular, but also very enabling as to what you come up with. Just show her and talk about it. I know
Did you
one
have
day.
that open relationship with them that you could contact at any time, like, hey, I've got this idea, what do you think about that? Like,
Yeah.
send them like, we've got WhatsApp now, so we can just go, oh, look at this, I've seen this pebble on this water, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There was an idea that we had about the indulgence of these rich people in Marie Antoinette, and a scene with battleships, miniature battleships in a fountain that was a folly for them to be entertained by. And producer didn't want to pay for it. He said, like, no way, that's not in the script. We're not doing that. And I said, how much is it? He says, oh, it's like, I don't know, it's $20,000. And I said, $20,000, that's nothing. And I said, I'll bet you $2,000 it's in the trailer. And if it's in the trailer, it's worth being in the film. And then they talked me into being in costume. And because it had cannons, we don't see the other ship, it had cannons, and we had to light the cannons so they'd fire at each other. But I also had a wonderful art director on this film, and Sibyl. There's
Where
another
are you?
picture.
Which one are you? Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. But then I won the battle and the battleship, and then Roman, her brother, loved it so much that he took it back to Napa, and it's at the winery. So it was definitely worth doing, but it was just a thing, like a whim, an idea, and trust, and like, yeah, let's do this. We can do this.
Well, talking of, I feel like that's a fruitful, creative moment there, you know, and that's what I was going to come to. Was there a moment that that collaboration's really worked, you've really kind of nailed it, and you're like, we've created magic? I mean, that sounds like it was pretty much there, but have you got any stories of that? Where you've gone, oh, yes, we've got it, we get each other, let's run.
I have a story about Jonathan after we did Married to the Mob, and we had so much fun doing that. The next film that he decided to do was something called Silence of the Lambs. And
Something.
It's just that.
well, he sent me the script, and I was horrified. I really was. I read this, and I said, I can't do this. If nothing else, there's going to be some copycat crazy person who does this in real life. Yeah. And so I called him and I told him I couldn't do the film, and he said, why not? And I said, because it's just too unspeakably horrible. And he said, well, you know, it's a feminist piece. And I said, well, yeah. But this guy makes skins out of women. So, you know, how is that a feminist piece? And he said, look, just trust me. I promise you, it's going to be fine. So the next thing we did was we went down and visited Quantico, which is the FBI training grounds outside of Washington, D.C. And we went into the actual FBI, and we went and visited with this guy named John Douglas, who was the head of the behavioral sciences division of the FBI, and he was tracking serial killers. And we went into his office, which, by the way, was a reconfigured bomb shelter, no windows. And I walked into his office, and on the wall are all these bodies and pictures of people that women have been terribly molested. It was awful. And I suddenly had a terrible case of claustrophobia. And I had to get out. And I had to go upstairs and get out and into the air. And the whole place looked like a Holiday Inn. And I said, we can't shoot this. This is disgusting. And Jonathan said, that's the point. When she says we're not in Kansas anymore, that's where their offices were. And it was all immaculate and clean. And so the contrast of what she becomes and what she has to do and the world she has to envelop and live in is so dramatically different than how she'd been trained. But it was that trust thing, again. even though I had hearts being delivered to me in my hotel room and the maids were going berserk because they thought I was doing some kind of bad voodoo. They refused to clean my room because I had skin samples with hairs coming out of it. You get into these things, you know. You develop, you become completely absorbed into that world.
I think that's very true often on films, isn't it? You forget that there's a real world out there and you're just living that world. And so when you're walking down the street with a mannequin or something odd, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to work. Oh, not to the general public, it's not. But KK, were you? No?
What was the question? Oh,
just the inspiring moment, that creative, juicy moment where you know that you've just connected together with the director on a... I think
there's a lot of them. I mean, Kristi's was such a good one because it was like, I won't go there, I'll go there. And my version's more like when I'd have to lead, like a director would get set in your mind, like, let's be very truthful, let's make it realistic because if it's fake, it'll just be horrid. Didn't trust, the arts to pull it off. And on a film I did with Spike, Adaptation, I had to talk him into shooting in a fake swamp because we couldn't find a real swamp. We couldn't go to a real swamp. It wasn't safe to be in a swamp for what we wanted to do or practical with the actors. And we kept looking for places. We found this place in California, and we just like, oh, this would do. We tested the water, and it was like, came back as like, can't put people in that. And then I said, well, I've got this idea. There's this empty lake on the Warner Brothers backlot, and it's concrete. And if we fill it up and build these islands on wheels and move them around every day, we'll never know where we are. So we had trees and islands with upside-down sod so that they were dirt and grasses and in boxes that we'd move around. And somehow, and the bonus of it was there was a 360 surround of tall bamboo and other trees so that it kept the light from coming in except in the middle of the day. And he wanted it to be pre-dawn, like soft. And it's the best we could do, and then we, fly in a big fly swatter to mask that light out. But the first time I took him there, when I saw it, it was a lake and there was a cabin and it was some kind of like slasher movie set up, and I said, no, wait, well, had to convince him. And then there was no other place to go, and so I convinced him, and then he came back and he goes like, wow, this is fantastic. And then, but it wasn't deep enough. And so I said, don't worry, have the actors walk on their knees. And they walked on their knees, and when you're walking on your knees, you're trudging, it looks like you're trudging through mud. So it worked.
I love that. And you, Karen?
Yeah. So this story almost got me fired from a pretty high-profile film, like I do like working with directors who've never directed a film before, and I was introduced to Bradley Cooper to do A Star Is Born, and after I met him and I committed to the job and everything, I just went home and I got really freaked out. I was like, this could be like a really bad remake and really kill my career, and it could be awful, and I just got really concerned about it. So I just started watching a bunch of music films, and that made it worse because you know those situations where someone's performing on stage and the camera's at the back of the audience, there's not enough people in the audience. It's just the whole thing is just, you're like, oh, this does not give you any emotion. It just is this weird sort of stage show. And so I thought, I'll watch some documentaries. So in that sort of phase of research, I came up with this idea, and I thought, I'm just going to propose this to Bradley and see what he thinks, because the producers had already rented a stage that we were going to build a bunch of different venues in and all of this. They had a plan even before I'd come to the project. And it didn't sit well with me. It was really worrying me. So I just went to Bradley and I showed him some films and I said, I think the experience of performance, I think the audience want to see that from the perspective of the performer. They want to see it from the backstage. They want to, understand how that is, how that feels to be on stage for the first time. Like when, Lady Gaga's character comes out and performs that song, and he loved the idea. And then, that sort of trickled down to the producers, and they called me into their office and they really laid the law down and said, I can't believe you went to Bradley with that. And then the DP, Maddie Libertique, got on board with my idea, and Bradley and went back to them and said, no, you're not firing her, and that's what we did. And it was a real moment of joy for me, because I was like, well, I could have been fired, which may not have been bad if the film was going to be bad, but just really thinking something through and coming to him with it, and he was very receptive. And I think it was, it made the way we filmed the movie very different. Like we went to Coachella and used their stages in between the 2 weekends there. And I mean, imagine trying to build that rigging and all that, put that lighting in. We programmed their lights. It was so much cheaper in the end. So what I could have got fired for ended up saving money in the production. So.
But also, it's an incredible shot. I mean, you live that experience as she walks out on the stage. And it's a pinnacle moment, I think, in the film. I think it's in the title sequence as well, that raw emotion. And what's amazing about that shot as well is that the people were real. And it makes such a difference when you see real people dancing as opposed to,
And it's the point of view of the girl who's afraid to go on stage.
Yeah.
So looking at that mass of people,
Yeah.
it's not just us saying like, oh, it's a big crowd. It's she's going like, that is terrifying. I'm not doing that.
And how terrifying it is in front of her.
That's production value.
Right, well, just on that note, really, I think I said, when did you get the courage to push through an idea with a director? Have you had many of those? But I think we've kind of covered that a little bit. Have you done anything wrong?
Yes.
Would you like to share it?
Sure. I'll bring these two instances. So in Silence of the Lambs, there's a pretty intense scene where the police think something's going on in this very, very fancy building called the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And we had been scouting locations in Pittsburgh, which is a fabulous city to shoot in. And this one building, even though I didn't know what we were going to do with it, I just kept saying, we got to shoot something here. And so out of nowhere, my ideas come at like 4 a.m. I decided that we would use it for the place where they house Hannibal Lecter before he's being transported to somewhere. I can't even remember where he's going. But anyway, so what we did was we took this beautiful, beautiful Beaux-Arts room and we stuck a giant cage in the middle of it where Hannibal Lecter was going to be housed. And we put rock and roll lights on top of it to sort of make it seem like he would be examined at all times of the day and night. I don't know. Oh, there it is. And so I went ahead, and I was inspired also by Francis Bacon and his Pope images. And so we put, and I told Karen O'Hara, who is my set decorator, I said, would you just get like a sheep's carcass or something? Because I want to hang it inside the room, and we'll put pants on it, and as if this is what happened to this poor guard. So we set this whole thing up, and we had the sheep's carcass in there with all the ribs showing, and the pants and the head, and everything is gruesome. And there's smoke and everything, and it's looking very dramatic. And I brought Jonathan and Ed Saxon, his producer, and Tak Fujimoto in to see it. And this was on the Friday. We were going to shoot on a Monday to see the final product. And so they walked into the room, and they took one look at this thing, and they turned around, and they left. And I started to scurry behind them, and I got out into the hallway, and they were both kind of white-faced, and they said, "People are going to run out of the theater throwing up. This is too far." And I said, "But it's an installation. It's like an art piece." And that just didn't go over very well. So Carl Fullerton, who's a remarkable makeup artist, said, "I have a body, and we'll cut the front of it off, and I'll put in some innards, and we'll stick it on the outside of the cage. How about that?" Oh, and the other problem was they didn't believe that Hannibal Lecter had enough time to skin the body, take off all the innards, and just show the ribs. That was their big problem. Another big problem with my installation. So they did that. They put him on the outside of the building, outside of the thing. I thought this was much more crude, but anyway, God bless. And so that's how we shot it.
Amazing. Wow. I love that idea of creativity and like trying to resource or come up with an idea on the spot. It's not something that it evolves to something else, but the idea that you have to sometimes fight back for your ideas, and there's a reasoning in it and a logic, but you know that pressure often can disseminate some of the creativity, I feel like, and I think that's
well, you know, it's interesting because reactions can come from anywhere. On Manchurian Candidate with Jonathan, Denzel Washington's character is a very obsessed military man who believes that he's been brainwashed. And I had made his house, his apartment, it was a very, very small set. And we were actually shooting in a real location, which I kept saying, "Can't we build this?" And of course, no, you don't have enough money to build this. We're going to use a real location. So it's a simple four-wall set, basically, and we did it in a way where everything was impeccable. His bed was made with perfect corners, his clothes, everything was just impeccable. And then, I don't know what made me say this, but I said, you know, maybe I should show this to Denzel before we start shooting tomorrow. So Denzel saw it, and he said, "Oh, no. No, 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 no." And I said, "What's wrong, Denzel?" And he said, "This guy is crazy. He can barely hold it together. If he gets dressed in the morning, that's the only thing that he can really do properly. His house should be a shit heap." So I called Jonathan and I said, "I think you're going to have to shoot something else tomorrow morning because we have to make some changes."
Yeah.
And I said, "Jonathan, do you want to talk to him or should we make the changes?" And Jonathan said, "Make the changes."
Oh, wow.
So off we went, and we bought every piece of garbage we could find and called up these prop houses and, you know, books and everything, and it turned into a huge fire hazard. But that's what we had to do, and we were ready to shoot by the afternoon.
Amazing. Well done. It's heartbreaking though sometimes, isn't it, when you have to change your set to... Like,
well, you just never know. You
Yeah.
just absolutely never know.
Yeah.
So, but it was a valid point. He definitely wanted something that we hadn't given. Yeah. And it was important for him, and Jonathan is very, you know, accommodating that way. And it would have been awful if we had forced him to be in there without, you know, the proper stuff, all those cup of noodles.
Karen, did you have a story about something going wrong?
Yeah, on Star is Born, actually, the way, because of this choice that we'd made very early, we were filming in venues all over Los Angeles and trying to make them look like they were all over the US. And we were in the Forum, and we had 12 hours to turn a Grammys set, which was quite a big digital set with a lot of infrastructure, around to the finale of the film. And we were shooting this once Bradley's character was dead, and he was only directing at this point. And up until then, everything had been quite seamless. Because he was acting, he just sort of left it to us a lot of the time. But with this one, he did not. And we were right at the end of the project, everybody was tired, and I think there was a miscommunication with my art directors, and they built the set for the second part the wrong way around on the stage. So we got there, and Bradley was uncharacteristically early and had beat us all there and was not happy. But luckily, everything was on wheels and we turned it around, but it wasn't a great way to end that project because it was, it had been so great the whole time, but it happens. And when everybody's tired often and there's no time to turn things around or there's no time for mistakes. But we managed to shoot our day. So.
And there was about the garage as well, was it that you were showing him images and he was kind of quite, he let you run with it, as it were? Yeah. But wasn't there a situation with the garage, the final scene, that he hadn't seen or something?
No, that was all okay. It was just this one. It was the finale to the film, yeah.
KK, did you?
There's so many. So many. It's like, you can't believe that a film ends up consistent with so much trial and error. Like, this is a good idea. That's a good idea. They're not good ideas together, When me and Spike were doing Her, we winged it so much, just like we were making it up as we went. We stumbled upon the aha moment where it's not the future, it's now, and it's not about technology. It's obviously got technology at the center of it, but let's not see the stuff. We want technology to do things for us without seeing it. Just read our minds, take care of it, like he walks into the house and the lights come on, and they go off behind him. So room to room. It's really simple things that you could do now, that we probably have now. But when I'm dressing the set, we had this great location downtown with real views, probably the only place with big windows and real views, and they were selling the building, so we got it for a song. We had it for a long time, and we used it for both his apartment and Amy Adams' apartment with a flip over. But all of a sudden he decides, I'm going to take Joaquin over to the set and show him the set. And we had just, I like to live with a set 2 or 3 days, dress it, tear it up, sit in chairs, throw papers and shoes around, and all that kind of stuff, and say nah. And you've got your decor team, but you've also got, shoppers and set dressers that are just taking things out and not editing. And it looked like a bad set. It was just like a bunch of stuff, but it didn't make sense of where he would bring it to this house. He walks in and he says, I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that. He says, I'm not planning on entertaining. I just broke up with my wife, and then it just dawned on me. We said, okay, go away. Yeah, we get it, go away. And then but it was a great lesson, and he was really tuned into the headspace of his character. And we tried to make it nice because we decided that everything in the film was nice as opposed to dystopian, where the only interfering force in his life was himself, that he couldn't deal with real humans and keep relationships alive. And so everything else was perfect. But his house still needed to reflect his dishevelment and uncertainty. And so we took the rug up and we rolled it and put it against the wall. We had a dining table with 3 chairs. We took the table away but left the chairs. Boxes unopened, just unfinished everything. Just like I'll get to that someday. And it added so much more character and so much more space to it. So ask your actors sometimes, yeah.
I love that.
But have enough time to fix it.
Have enough time. And then another thing on the same line, this is a generalization, but when you know somebody really well, there'd be times like, we don't really want to do that, do we? Yeah. It's like, haven't we seen that scene before? We don't. And you go, like the dead eye, the stink eye. And then I learned, I said, never to say negative things unless you have 3 better ideas lined up.
Yeah.
And one of them has to be something the director didn't think they could do, but you know they'd bite on.
Oh, that's
They couldn't afford, or like, really? We can do that? Oh, yeah, let's do that instead. Like big carrot.
But you have to have that collaboration also and that trust with that person, I think, to be brave enough, maybe.
Yeah, but it's also not fair to be negative.
No,
even in a close relationship, it's really not fair to be negative. It's much better to have another idea. And you don't like that one? I got another one. You don't like that one? I got another one.
Great.
There is one time on Revolutionary Road, we were building a set for Leonardo DiCaprio when he comes to work every day in the same place. It was one of those kind of cubicle things. I think there is an image maybe of it. I don't know if that came through or not. But anyway, and it was, a beautiful set with cubicles with, 30 extras in it. You see it now, but when we first came in, everyone was fine, everyone thought it was great, and then suddenly the DP or the camera operator, I can't remember who it was, said, well, we can't see their heads, which meant that every single little wall had to be shorter. So everybody went away at lunch, and this miracle set dresser lead man, Philip, oh God, what's his last name? Canfield. Thank you, Fanny. Philip Canfield took his guys, and every single leg of this cubicle had to be cut off by 6 inches over lunch, so that by the time they came back, you could see their heads. What I might have asked, but I didn't, was, can't you just raise the camera up?
Yeah. It's funny, actually, one of my questions was about, obviously the first collaboration is with directors and that, and you've had this brainstorming, you've decided on things, but I do think that it's quite interesting how early and how involved the DP gets in the issue with lights and whose area that is and how things are lit and, and how that changes the colour of your paint, like those Roscoe torches, which are amazing. I just was thinking about, do you work with directors who work with the same DPs? Does that dialogue start early on? How does that work?
I think
And lenses.
if they're not available, unfortunately, in the American system, they're not on at the beginning because they get paid more than you. So they're counting the days they can afford them. And they should at least do a practice, like put us at the end for the visual effects and put them at the beginning for the scouting and all of the early think tank stuff. It's really, really important to be in sync with the DP and not feel like he's catching up or having to say like, I don't like that, I want this, like you have to be in sync really early on. It's an ally, he or she. So you have to go on your way. And it's kind of like getting the script early and contaminating your brain even though you're not paid yet. You have to keep sending them stuff so that they're like, no, that's not what you're going to do. Well, let me come down. Let me look at that.
And obviously, sorry, Karen, I'll let you, about lenses and things, because it's all right. I mean, I've had an incident with my friends there where we've built sets for commercials, And then on the day they've come in and they've shot a table, and we're like, oh, push
Kill your
ourselves
children.
So
If that's all you need, sometimes it's protection. In commercials, sometimes it's presentation, so they know where their money went. Don't get upset.
I think it's especially on a project that's smaller, it's great to have the DP in that first phase with you. Like on True History of the Kelly Gang, Ari Wegner, who's also an Australian cinematographer, she was with us from the very beginning, and she, in fact, sat in our office, in the art office, and Alice Babbage, the costume designer, was just across the way. So Justin held us all very close because he knew that he had limited resources, and in the previous panel, they were discussing information, and I think at that point, when those key collaborators have all the information, you can just do things quicker, and decisions can be made, better decisions, that you can save money, you can, everyone's sort of on the same page. So part of my collaboration with Justin on that particular film and on the next one actually was Adam Markapur also came to Canada very early, and he helped us with the scouting. We had a lot of locations, we had a lot of sieges and guns, and it was a very different type of project, but set in the 80s. But he was very much part of that process, and again, he already knew what the problems with the locations were in terms of lighting, so he wasn't asking me for things I couldn't give him. We'd sort of all come together to discuss that very creative part in the beginning, where how are we going to do it? And then there was none of those. What ends up happening is you don't get those situations that we've just been discussing, where you end up on the day and someone's not happy, or things are too tall, or there's not enough lights. So.
And not just lights, window treatments.
Oh, yeah, everything.
Yeah.
The dreaded shears.
Yes. Yes.
Voiles.
I had the bad taste one time. I think my brain was a little unfiltered. To tell a very famous DP that only DPs and grannies use shears in their homes.
Keeping IKEA going around the world.
Actually, I did on Changing Lanes. It was a huge law office, and it was all glass everywhere. And two things I want to mention about that. The first is, if you're going to design an office and it's glass everywhere, make sure you design the ceiling. And make sure inside of the ceiling you have lights. Because if you don't, then every time you have it'll reflect everything. And it'll reflect all the lamps, all the things that you put down on the ground. And I did that. I knew that we needed to do that. So we had this very, very elaborate ceiling. And it had all these lights in it. And everybody could dial things in or out. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so smart. I just did it. And then the night before, again, these things happen. The night before the shoot, or maybe it was the day before the shoot, the key grip came to me, and he said, these glass walls have about a 1/16 of an inch clearance before they could fall. Every single one of these glass walls. And I said, that's impossible. We measured it. There's supposed to be at least an inch of channel to hold these glass walls in place. And he said, well, look, and he showed it to me, and it was really a 1/16 of an inch. And I said, what happened? Well, we were shooting inside an armory in Brooklyn, and it had snowed, and then the snow melted, and the ceiling went up, and we had hung all of the entire roof of this office was suspended from the top of the building. And so when all the heavy snow left, there was a slight expansion of the roof, and so every single one of these glass walls could fall.
Epic.
So God bless this wonderful grip. He said, you can have all my men and the set dressers and the construction guys, and they all came over and they dropped another inch of wood around every single one of these walls. But there's also a Roscoe story. Is he here? So I get a phone call from the DP, Sal, and he says, Kristi, there is so much magenta on this drop, I don't know what the hell happened. And I said, what do you mean? He said, go and look. And I go outside on the balcony, so that's a 360-foot drop. And it's magenta everywhere. So I called Roscoe and I said, what happened? Because he sent me a sample and the sample was fine. And this was just before the Christmas break. And so Roscoe was devastated, of course. I was too. And Sal said, I can't shoot this. So a team of painters over the Christmas break went in and painted out every piece of magenta before we shot.
Did they have a Christmas too?
They gave them a big bonus.
Good. Okay, so it's quite interesting because you've all worked with the same director in a few projects, and just for my own interest, do you always work with the same director? Do you think if they get a job, you know that you're going to get the call? If they get the job, you know?
No.
No.
And I think something I learned quite early is you can get very hurt in this business, you know, and I think, there's always a really good reason why someone might choose somebody else for a project. And after that project comes out and you've had time to think about it, you're like, yeah, they're more suited to that than I am. Yeah. But it can be, you can start to think that you're going to work on everything with someone. And especially in my experience, when you work with someone for the first time, and if that's one of their first films, you think, oh, well, we've established this relationship. But then, for various reasons, producers get involved, there's more money, they might think that, for not necessarily great reasons, people are often typecast as designers, I think. Like, this person's good at period, this person's good at, sci-fi, this person's good at doing, sort of a more verite style. And I try to do really different projects, and sometimes I suffer from that a little bit, in that a group of producers might think, well, she hasn't done something like this before. Yeah. So over the years, I've just learned not to be offended by it, because those directors that I have collaborated with, I've remained in contact with most of them, and I might do a commercial with them here and there, and then they're doing something else with someone else. And I think often the time in between, if you work with someone once and then do a few other projects and then work with them again on their third project, for example, you've learned a lot and so have they. So that next collaboration has evolved, and I think that that's a good thing, but it's hard not to be hurt sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. What about you guys?
You never expect. I did Lost in Translation as a little bit of a bailout. I was there more than the other designer was there for a very short time, and then as kind of a payback, and it was low budget, $4 million, and then as a payback, all of a sudden, from the success, she got Marie Antoinette, so she said, do you want to do Marie Antoinette? I go, yeah. Paris, and talk about not being typecast. I'd never done period, Yeah. And just, it was trust, and got in. And then we've never worked since. Oh. But she also went back, out of loyalty, went back to the original designer of Lost in Translation, who used to be her roommate, and she knew very well. And also used to work with Dean Tavlaris, not too shabby. So it was perfect, you know.
And you, Kristi?
I think probably the only time I was, I had worked with Marty on Goodfellas, and then he did, what's that period piece he did after that? I've conveniently forgotten.
Not Departed.
No. This was with Michelle Pfeiffer and Daniel Day-Lewis. Which? No. Age of Innocence. And I was really wanting to do that. And he wanted to work with, I think it was Dante Ferretti. And I totally understood why. But I was sad because I would have wanted to do that as well. And when I did see the film, I saw, okay, that's how they did it, and great, and whatever. But it did...
Whatever.
But I would have done a good job, too.
Okay, I think I've asked enough questions. I'd like to open it up to the audience. If any of you've got questions, I think there's microphones coming round. But thank you.
Hello. Thank you all. My question is about if you might share an experience of a time where the constraints of a project, what be it time or money or labor, actually helped you arrive at something better.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Excuse me. On Justin's project, True History of the Kelly Gang again, we definitely had to build sets, but we had a very limited budget. And we couldn't build them on stage. We couldn't really afford the stages either. So we had to build things in the landscape, and that we needed to find landscape that gave us more art. So we found these beautiful desolate landscapes around Melbourne and Victoria. And I just kept on putting my drawings in and budgeting them, and then I was like, we can't afford the sets. You know, there are environments in the script. We're going to have to think about how to make those. And I just looked at the budget line by line, and I could see that glass was really expensive. All the windows were really expensive in these environments. And my art director and I just decided we wouldn't put glass in the windows. And so we just sort of took that approach. We were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to make these are going to be more like sort of shelters than homes. And I don't think you miss it in the film, but it saved us enough money to be able to build 3 sets, interior and exterior. And I think sometimes, you know, Justin was fine with it. He actually saw it as a positive thing, and the DP was definitely fine with it. So, yeah, that was a good situation.
You changed the texture of the walls, didn't you? Do you think it kind of focused the design more of it? Like...
Yeah, we did focus a lot more on the walls. We put a lot of graffiti on those walls and used metal, and the scenic artists had a lot more to do, but I think we saved in materials and labour before it came. So I spent more money on scenic, which I think we were going to see more of, because as the film progresses, everything gets a bit smaller, and we're really seeing what's on those walls. So we were able to put detail where it was needed.
Beautiful. Anyone want to answer that question?
I'll just say one other thing, which is that oftentimes producers particularly say, you're not going to build anything. And that actually, for me personally, I love finding locations. It's one of my favorite things, because you find things that you would never think of in a million years. A film like Goodfellas had 96 locations in it. We were moving trucks 3 times a day. We did not build, I don't think we built one set in that film. And I think that building is oftentimes an expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
So if you can't build, then you have to find everything, which can be also very costly because then you're moving trucks and doing all kinds of other things. But for me, I enjoy that kind of a film because it gets me into places that I would never be in otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
I even, if I know I'm going to have to build something because of practicality or the short term we're going to be in it, so we have to build a couple small things together, I'll go scout those locations to steal ideas and then bring those ideas back, just to still have reality.
There's a couple of hands up just in front of me here.
Hi, you were talking about liking to have the DP along on with scouting locations, and my question is, I feel in the very early stages rather territorial about that because I'm learning the world, and I want that to be in my head, and I don't want the feedback until I've had a chance to digest the environment. So for me, having the DP like from day one scouting, I don't care for. I was wondering how you all felt about that.
It depends on who the DP is. I like to scout before I show the director, and you want to take him to the sweet spot where everything looks great, and you want to bring him on the right time of day. And the same thing with the DP. But I was working with Roger Deakins, and he says, "You guys scouted without me?" And then it was in Manhattan, and he walked 50 blocks and found 2 amazing locations on the way back. And so I would trust him.
Roger was the same one who didn't like the height of the office partitions. So there.
Yeah, I do. I was talking about a specific project, and before that person came on board, Justin and I did discuss photographs, but because of the sort of truncated schedule, it just worked out that way. But I understand that idea of feeling a little territorial, and sometimes what they're thinking about is very different to what you're thinking about when you're trying to build a world. And I definitely wouldn't want to, if I was drawing a set or conceiving of something in that way, I definitely wouldn't want a DP looking over my shoulder, because I think you need that time to find it and dream about it and make a drawing and then throw it away. You need all of that time, so you don't want someone breathing down your neck. But I think if you've, in that particular case, we didn't have much time, and I think with this person, this DP, it was okay. It just, again, I agree with KK, it depends on who the DP is. Yeah.
But also, if you don't want the DP there, be ready with the DP answers. I mean, if you bring the producer along, they could go like, oh, they have a wrong attitude, it's not creative, it's like, what's this cost? And sometimes DPs will have, like questions like, well, where am I going to hide my lights? Can I control these lights? Or where's the sun? And you should have those answers for them so that you can defend that.
For example, if you're scouting locations and you find something and it's wonderful, but it's 4 flights up, no elevator, no one's going to like you very much. Because they have to haul all this stuff up 4 flights. The lighting out the window is going to have to be on a scaffolding of some kind, or a cherry picker, or one of those very expensive pieces of machinery. So in a certain sense, you have to think like a DP sometimes, and show people things that have an easy way of lighting them. I remember Tak Fujimoto on The Beloved. We built this wonderful set, and he looked at me and he said, "How am I going to light it?" And I had some ideas in my head, and I told them to him, and he went shuffling off, and he said, "Okay." But having a good relationship with your DP is not a bad thing. So I agree with you, though, going out and finding these locations to start with is your private time. It's your time to get ideas. And oftentimes, DPs like being tied to a shape of a room or an office or whatever, where they don't have the freedom of losing walls. Michael Ballhaus was someone like that, who loved just being encased in a room and having to make that work. But it's all about who your DP is, but it's making that relationship with him, as her or him, that's as important as the director, I think, ultimately.
Excellent. Oh, it's a nice hands up there. Oh, there's somebody there with a...
Hi, thank you all. I think I'd like to piggyback on that last question about being territorial in DPs. So let's say you're working with a director, maybe it's a new one, maybe it's an old one, but for whatever reason, the creative marriage seems to have gotten off on the wrong foot. Do you have any advice to kind of, bring everyone back around into harmony?
Try really hard. Listen. Listen. Spike has a great trick where if he doesn't like something, he goes, I mean, you kind of get it, but you can play that game backwards. You can kind of play that game backwards. You go like, what about this, You have to get it back on track because it'll accelerate. It's like a conversation, it's like an argument where you're both going at full tilt, and then all of a sudden you stop and their last words just hang in the air like a bad stench. And then you don't want that to happen. You've got to bring it down. You got to let each other win one, lose one. You've really got to try to understand where they're coming from. Yeah. And sometimes if they're not coming from a certain place, it may be that you've thought ahead of them and they haven't caught up yet, and they want more time to think about it. And then you got to catch that and give them more time. So we'll come back to this. Let's just not anchor it right now.
And ultimately, you are, in terms of not just hierarchy, but it is the director's vision, and you're trying as best you can to help them figure out what this is. And some directors are incredibly visual, but some aren't. And so you kind of get that sense in the very beginning when you're talking to the director. I mean, one of the things that I love to do, and I've always done it and I will always do it, is to sit with the director in the very beginning with the script, page by page, and talk about the script. And what are the ideas, what are the visions, and you don't have to have any visual aids at all. It's just to sit with that person and let them talk about what they think is important about the script. And that way, it gives you enough time to kind of get their thoughts and their ideas about what is important. And then you come away with it having a bit more of an idea of also the relationship that you're going to have with the director, which can change, obviously. There are people who are lovely before you shoot with them, and they turn into monsters when you're in the heat of the battle. But at least you start on the same page, hopefully. But it's about bending like bamboo, is this one
adapting.
Yeah, it's like let it happen and then come back up. Let it happen again and then just come back up.
Somebody once said to me, a director actually said, most of the time when people are upset or angry or shouting, it's because they're scared. And I thought that was really, and because then what you do is you empathize with that person and you come away and kind of can go into the situation a little bit differently. And I think if you go along with that, then it really changes the dynamics, doesn't it?
One last quick Spike story. It circles back to soft prep. I forgot about this. But we used to go on a retreat for 4 days for the first number of films, it was the same assistant director, DP, editor, costume designer, myself, producer. And so we'd go away for 4 days, and all we do was hang out together, have dinner together, cook breakfast together, and he would read the script to us. So this was his download time to say that what's not on the page, this is how I see this. And then it's your turn to ask 1,000 questions, you know, like, where is that? You know.
Yes, me? At the last gathering, I spoke to KK, and you asked me which director I wanted to work with most in the future, and to sort of set that goal. And I did, you know. I'm far off from working with her, but I was thinking to myself, have you guys ever manifested a director into your life, and was it as fruitful a collaboration as you hoped?
Your turn. If you have an answer.
Actually, I read a book a few years ago that really touched something in me. It was about it was something to do with the point I was at in my life, my age, and I really sort of got through this book very quickly. And I just happened to read something in the sort of week or so after it that a film was being made. Someone had optioned it, and they were making a film about it. And the director was Marielle Heller. And I had never met her. I didn't know anyone that she knew. And I just put it out there, to a couple of people that I was going on, and when you read a book and you just go on and on about it for weeks, and all your friends are like, yep, we're clear. So it was a situation like that, but because I sort of started to talk about it, and it wasn't going to be a big film, and it was just one that was going to be made over summer in Los Angeles, and I was excited about that because I've got a young daughter and I could have her with me, and I thought, if this works, it'll be really great. And she heard from somebody that I'd been talking about this book, and then she approached me. So it was just a really nice sort of serendipitous situation. And I didn't go after her as much as I just started talking about it. And I think sometimes if you are really interested in something, if you communicate that enough and you're clear about it, then it may happen, or it may lead to something in the future.
Fantastic. Wow. Okay. Yeah. We've got 5 minutes left. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? Yeah. Rachel, over there. Hi.
Oh, thanks.
There's a mic.
My question is on behalf of the early career designers and student designers in the room, because one thing I hear a lot, especially in scenarios where they're doing productions and there is very little money, inexperienced or brand new producers, is that they don't feel like they get to the director, that they're not in the wheelhouse with them, that they're an afterthought. And I just wondered if you had any advice specifically to these beginning folks about how they might address that or overcome that.
Great question.
Rachel, it's very interesting you're bringing this up, because NYU has, at least in the past, I was pretty amazed at how quickly, I did a collaboration class at NYU for a while. And it was a wonderful thing because up until we did that collaboration class, a lot of the students thought that they had to do everything. A lot of the filmmaking students felt that, everything was sort of in their wheelhouse. And I kept saying over and over again to the administration how important it was to create an environment where these filmmakers recognize that they have other people that they're going to be dealing with, that it's not just their world. And ironically, there would be moments during the school year where we were making these films where suddenly the director would take the budget from the costume designer and use it to get a lens. All right, so this is not good because it is a collaborative operation, making a film. We've heard nothing but that since we've been here. And it's true. I mean, you can't do it by yourself. So my advice to your students who are here, and also the ones that you're going to be working with, is to make sure that the administration of NYU and any other film school understands that in order to make films, you use and work with other people. Not use, work with a capital W, work with other people who can help to create the world that your film needs. Because it's not a one-way street with one person. It's just not. So please fight for your positions, students, as designers, whether it's costume or lighting or sets, because it's the most important thing that your director is ever going to learn.
Woo! Okay, and I think we'll call that a wrap.
Very good.